Hey everyone, welcome back to I Heart Animation. It feels like such a long time since I've done one of these, and it has been a while since I've done one of these sit down and talk to the camera videos. October was kind of insane for me, but hopefully this next month will be a lot quieter, and hopefully I will be able to get more done than I did last month. Anyway, today's video is going to be a bit different. I'm not going to be talking about a movie, which up until now that's basically all I've been doing for this show. My original idea was mostly to focus on more obscure animation, probably older things, nothing that just came out. And then Netflix dropped Hilda, and I couldn't not talk about Hilda. For those of you who may not have heard about it, Hilda is a brand new series on Netflix. It debuted in September, and it follows the adventures of a little girl named Hilda who lives in the woods. Basically, she lives alone with her mother and meets all sorts of mythical creatures in the woods, and basically just explores and has adventures. After the first couple of episodes, some things happen that sort of force her and her mother to leave the woods, and they have to move to the city. But as much as she hates that she has to move to the city, she does not let that detract her from having adventures. So before it even began, like back when Netflix released the very first trailer, I knew that the show was going to be something special. It just looked different. It looked really good. There was just something about the animation style and the music and the character design. It looked like something that I knew I was going to like. However, I did not realize how good it was going to be. Like, by the end of the first 2 episodes, I was hooked. It was already one of my favorite shows. Like, Gravity Falls is probably my all-time favorite animated series. And I thought there would never be another show like Gravity Falls. And then Hilda happened. And this is not to say that Hilda is just like Gravity Falls, because they are very different shows. Gravity Falls has a very specific kind of humor that Hilda does not have. And that's not anything against Hilda, because as much as I love the similarities between Gravity Falls and Hilda, I also love their differences. Like Gravity Falls, its humor it's darker. It leans more towards witty one-liners and sarcasm, and I really like that, but Hilda has a much gentler sense of humor. Everything about her and her mother is just sweet, and I don't mean that in a negative way, because sweetness sometimes can be sickening. But this is not that kind of sweetness. This is like genuine warmth and kindness, and like most everybody in the show just has that about them. Hilda, her mother, her friends, David and Frida, but especially David. Like, I watched this with Sarah, and Sarah she fell in love with David. She wants a child like David. But that warmth and kindness sort of permeates the entire show, and I love that about it. And that warmth and kindness is even there when the show gets kind of dark and scary, which it does occasionally, but it always has that, I don't know, the sweetness to fall back on. And even like when it gets dark and scary, it's always like a nice version of dark and scary. Like one thing, there's a creature in the episode, or a couple of episodes, with a creature called a Mara, which is a nightmare spirit from Scandinavian folklore. But in Hilda, it's a teenage girl who has the power to give people nightmares, and then she goes and gossips with her other friends about what kind of scary dreams they gave people. So it's like they take kind of a dark concept and then give it a lighter twist, and they use these concepts in a way that they can be a bit creepy, but it's sort of in a cuter, more, I don't know, creatively kid-friendly way. And like I mentioned, the Mara, which is something from, I believe, Scandinavian folklore. But there are so many other creatures from that part of the world. I'm fairly certain that most of the creatures in this show have like actual, real folkloric roots. Like there are some that I think they made up for the show. Like there's these things called wafts, which is such a British sounding word. This is a British cartoon, which is another thing I love about this. But these wafts, they're like a cross between a puppy and a dandelion puff, and they just sort of float through the air making whale noises. They're very adorable, and I think they're one of the things that the show has made up for themselves. But there's other things like a lindworm and tide mice, actual mythological creatures that I'd never heard of, which I actually looked up, and they're actually real mythological creatures. And there's such a wide variety of these myths and legends that Hilda draws on, which is another thing that it has in common with Gravity Falls, which I love. But the way they use them is so different. Like Gravity Falls has a very distinctive American feel to it. Like it's set in Oregon, and a lot of the creatures are like cryptozoological science fiction type things. But while Gravity Falls leans more towards American and science fiction stuff, Hilda leans more towards British and fantasy. And I just love that about it. And I love that they're drawing on a lot of real but very obscure mythology for their stories. So, not that you need me to prove how good the show is or how much people actually love it, but I've actually had a few people who really loved the show and loved it enough that they agreed to record some of their thoughts and share them with me for this video. So, I guess without further ado, let's see what some of my friends have to say about Hilda.
Hi, everybody. So it's such a treat to get to come on Jonathan's channel and talk a little bit about Hilda. Hilda is something that I just devoured. I normally am not a binger. That's not how I usually enjoy entertainment. But I loved this show so much, I just couldn't stop. And I loved pretty much everything about it. I loved Hilda as a character. I loved how creative it was, and there were different sort of levels of world building within the show. I thought it had something to say without being too heavy handed. I like how each episode kind of stood on its own, but there still was a story throughout as well. I loved all the voice acting was brilliant. I thought the animation was brilliant and very like soothing and calming. And I loved just the color palette was so great. And probably my favorite moment in the whole season was when the giant steps on Hilda's house, and of course, they're devastated. And then you see back and you realize that they have the elf stepped on their house. And so, I don't know, I just thought that's the kind of really nice little message that's just like these little thoughts without being too heavy handed. I loved it. I thought it was brilliant. And I can't wait to see even more. Yeah, everybody should watch it. It's great. Thanks so much. Bye.
I've only seen very few episodes of Hilda. I haven't finished the first season. I started watching with my boyfriend and he absolutely loves it. I really like the style of animation. I really like the color palette. I think it's super unique that they barely use very specific colors, and I think it just looks so different and unique. And I don't watch that many cartoon shows, but for me that felt very unique, and I don't know, it just gave me kind of like fall vibes, and I really liked it. I think the story is very interesting, creative. I like how it combines kind of reality with this fantasy, and it doesn't really explain why things are like that. It's normal to have these things there. Something I found so funny was like how the elf people love so much paperwork, and like their fights are just like them signing stuff and like the intense music. I thought it was so funny how like these adorable little things all they care is paperwork, which is very funny and very creative. And I don't watch a lot of cartoon shows, but I did notice that there were some elements that reminded me of anime, like the creatures look for me things that appear a lot in animes, but I don't know if because of my lack of knowledge of cartoons, but that reminded me of it, and the sense of fantasy. I thought it was really cool. I really like the characters and the humor, and I think I'm really excited that Netflix did such a cool show, and I think they're really stepping up with their animation, especially with their latest movie, Next Gen.
I think Hilda is one of the best animated shows of the year. I really loved the art style. It looked like it came straight out of the graphic novel by Pearson. I like the color palettes, the character design, the background art is all beautiful. Each of the 13 episodes in the first season are standalone stories, but the whole show is episodic, and it feels like a series that is really binge friendly because the characters evolve as the episodes go along. I really liked that aspect of it. The characters are fully fledged. Even the mom, who is not a secondary character, even though that's usually what the moms are in shows like this. She is a great character, a smart, uh, well-rounded, and loving character. And so is everyone else. All the side characters are well written. Alpha, Frida, David, the giants, the elves. Everyone is really well written and really likable. It reminds me of Adventure Time and Gravity Falls, which are also fantasy shows, but this one has its own unique vibe. It's much more quiet and mature than the shows that are usually on the Disney Channel and Nickelodeon and stuff like that. Hilda is fantastic. There aren't enough animated shows like it. It doesn't try too hard to be funny, but it's got its own charm and heart. And totally likable characters who are easy to root for, and it's great, and you should definitely watch it on Netflix.
I guess there's not that much more that I can say myself about the show, because I don't want to give away anything big. I want you to go in knowing as much as I did when I started watching it. I mean, you'll know a little bit more than I did because of this review, but I just want you to be surprised at the quality of the storylines that Hilda has to offer. It's just such a unique and wonderful show that I cannot recommend it enough. Okay, I think that's going to be all for today's episode of iHeart Animation. Next time I will be joined by Rachel Wagner, and we will be talking about a very unique French film called April and the Extraordinary World. So come back for that, and we'll see you then. Bye.